Hello and good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Diana Lopez. I'm the advisor on cities and local governments at UNDP here in New York. I'm going to explain about the translation briefly. So we have interpretation for English, Spanish and French. Tenemos interpretación al español, al francés y al inglés.
We have interpretation to Spanish, French, and English. You have to select interpretation. If there is a button, you will be able to follow all the event in Spanish.
For French interpretation, it's the same instructions. You just click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select your language of choice, that is English in this case.
And we are going to continue this event today in Spanish. We have with us Grisel Avila, that is the Territorial Development Coordinator for UNDP in Bolivia. And we have Antoni Montseny, Director of International Relations of the Provincial Council in Barcelona. We will talk today about how certain municipalities pool services so that there are certain municipalities that cannot afford certain services because they don't have the resources, the human capital, and how the option to pool services and getting organized among small municipalities and municipalities from metropolitan areas, how this is an advantage, how this can help certain municipalities to get services that they could not individually. We will have a conversation between Grisel and Tony, how this is a reality in the Barcelona experience, a conversation that came up with Grisel talking about the situation in Bolivia, how other countries face this problem, and we found interesting to escalate this conversation and to record it in order to share it with all of you. We are recording this video so that it is not on the web, but then we will edit and we will upload it to our YouTube channel. And I invite you to use the chat that you have at the bottom of your screens in order to make comments, introduce yourselves. I see that certain colleagues are using it already to introduce themselves and to ask questions or make comments for Tony or for the moderator on the chat. I will be checking the chat to see that everything is cleared. So without further ado, Grisel, I give you the floor, and we are all very excited to listen to you and learn from you. All yours. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you, Anthony, for being with us today. Also, all the participants that want to learn about this topic that is so interesting, this experience of the Barcelona Provincial Council. As Diana said, today we will have quite an interactive session. Tony will introduce first some things about the Provincial Council, his experience, and I will raise certain questions so that everything becomes clearer. Anthony, I give you the floor so that you can start. And you know that I will interrupt you when I have questions so that we are all very clear regarding the topic and the experience of the Barcelona Provincial Council. A pleasure, no problem. But first of all, call me Tony. Tony. Antonio, colloquially, everybody calls me Tony. Okay, well, I have many names also, no problem. Okay, I don't like Antonio. I like Tony. Everybody calls me Tony. Okay, having said that, very briefly, I will talk about the Barcelona experience. Well, I want to tell you that in the Spanish state, we have three levels of organization. We have the state organization, then the regional autonomous organization, in where we have the legal order in Spain. We have legislative entities, so they can carry out actions and they can create standards that affect locally. And then we have the local sphere. In the case of the local sphere basically refers to service delivery administration. There's no legislation beyond the ordinances and the regulations that in the case every city council can establish, but they are not general, but every municipality has its own standards. Having said that, in the local Spanish world, not only is made up of municipalities, but also it is made up of provinces, and provinces are local authorities, are local worlds in the sense that the provinces are made up by the administration, so with its assembly and the members that are part of the assembly, we call them um, council, councillors, local councillors. They must be mayors or municipal councillors of their area. And this is very important because, unlike the rest of the administration, the provincial councils do not have direct elections, but rather indirect elections. And therefore, they respond clearly to what we would call the picture of the municipalities covered by every one of the provinces. That is, the political forces that have been chosen locally in the provincial council have a proportional representation. So that leads to a situation in which the actions or the work or the activity that can be planned from the very same provincial council, it's a planning and an action that corresponds to the reality of the municipalities. They are not elements that has to do with the national government. Sometimes the national government is different from the regional government, or maybe the majority of the political party of the provincial council might be different from the political party of the municipalities. In this case, it is an indirect election. Uh, so maybe a citizen in a certain vote votes for one, and in a certain vote it votes for another. We are a local entity. It's very clear. So, what's the mission that we have? The mission that we have is to make sure that in our territory that was defined, the services and the delivery of services done by the city council should have a minimum common denominator, not only because there are mandatory competencies by the uh, municipalities, but because there is a local political decision to provide a certain delivery of services, certain actions, and that these actions should have a minimum common denominators, and that the citizen, regardless of the municipality where he lives, should be able to enjoy of those services. In the case of the province of Barcelona, you can imagine that one thing is the city of Barcelona as capital city and the metropolitan area, where obviously the municipalities that are part of the metropolitan area in Barcelona are municipalities that are rich, powerful. They are municipalities that are very populated. There they have a level of service delivery that is high, good, and almost complete. While it is also true that in the province of Barcelona, then we have territorially a belt of intermediate cities. We are talking about that in the metropolitan area, the municipalities have around 60, 70,000 inhabitants, or half a million or 1 million as the city of Barcelona. In this other belt of municipalities, um, uh, uh, in a second tier, there are municipalities that are intermediate. We are talking about the municipalities that have around 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 inhabitants. But then we have all the rest of territories that that the provincial council of Barcelona has 311 municipalities, but with the rest of municipalities that would be 150 that have a population that is much smaller, and we have municipalities of less than 100 inhabitants, and we have one municipality that is very small that has 23 inhabitants. So we have we have a incredible geographical dispersion. So that leads to a situation in which we see territorial differences, especially in the smaller municipalities. And it is there where the Barcelona Provincial Council has the goal and the vision to work and to focus its actions. In which sense? In the sense that there are a set of services that obviously enough should be scattered, distributed, and should be shared. We, for example, manage all the library networks, and at legislative level, it is mandatory for each municipality of more than 5,000 inhabitants to have its own library. But in turn, what we do is to create mobile equipment or localized equipment that also allow the library service to be enjoyed by the population that is not in these municipalities. Super, super, because we have a single catalog. Everybody has the full catalog. Yes, I interrupt you. Yes, yes, interrupt me. I believe that it is excellent. Look, something important that you have said is that you put the citizen at the core of the decision. And that is very good because typically administrative procedures and red tape start before the citizen. So uniform services is something very important. But as you told me that you have this great dispersion and this difference in the sizes of municipalities, some are bigger, some are smaller, even some of less than 100 inhabitants. That is a challenge. So can you add, how is it that you come to an agreement? How do you handle the decision-making process? How is the governance? Because all this, I suppose, has certain political, strategic value. How is it that the political will can be aligned in order to reach consensus? What we do to reach consensus is that we have two big instruments which are organized under two big strategies. There is one strategy that we call, which is what we call the network of municipalities, where what we do is that in a bilateral way with every city council at the beginning of the administration, we sit down, we call it the consultation table. And with the municipality, what we do is to establish a dialogue where what we do is to detect which are the needs and priorities that that municipality has. This um, we assess those needs, that is shared, that is detailed, and with this information, what we do is to make a list of demands. We have a list of demands, and that list of demands, then we cross it, we compare it with the other conversations that we have with the other consultation tables that we have with other municipalities.
In this fashion, we somehow accommodate everything and we see how it works, because every municipality is independent and we see where there are connection ties and common interests. For example, in a certain area, I mean, there should not be an area that is adjacent to the other. There is a municipality that might be interested in developing certain cultural policies or certain sports policies. Therefore, what we do is to organize these consultation tables in which we put forward for discussions the requirements or the needs that these places have. It's a list of needs, what needs the municipality has, and the city council has been defining the needs and the priorities. And then once we have detected those needs, what we do is to sort of to match them and to put them in common. And therefore we create small micro networks, the micro networks of municipalities, bearing in mind that, I mean, the problem with networks then is that we are quote unquote managing and working with municipalities that have different natures, that they have the same entity but are different in nature. Therefore, what we do is a sort of a spoke and hub network, in which at the hub we have the Council of Barcelona, and this is the central management element, the one that somehow contacts with the municipalities, and we strike a balance, because then we focus on the way in which we will support them, whether we will provide technical support, economic support, whether we will provide them material support. And therefore we strike a balance, and then we know that if we will provide certain economic support, we might at a certain point in time justify the fact that we need to make more investment here, or take some other action in another municipality that has to do with promotion, for example. It all has to do with the characteristics of the needs to be met, or the services to be rendered, or the public policy that would be implemented. This is one part. And another part is what we call the service catalog, where we have defined a series of public policies and a series of services. And what we do is, through a competition, that is to say, municipalities apply to a protocol that we have, and they request their participation in the catalog, and they request the services that they believe would be more necessary, or the ones that they are interested in. And in this case, for example, the catalog includes accounting services, registration services. There is a very successful service that we have just issued, in which there are mobile ATMs, because there are many municipalities that don't have banks available, and there is a single ATM. Therefore, we have developed a network of mobile ATMs, and through these catalogs, the municipalities request their services. Say, well, I need the service of a mobile ATM. Therefore, there is a scheduling done, and we know that on Tuesday and Thursdays, we will be moving an ATM to a certain municipality, and the citizens have that service available, that it would be impossible for them to use it. They would have to move to the capital city of the region, or move to the next door municipality that, given its size, render or provide these services, like the use of an ATM. And this is a very appropriate service that is working very well. Okay, thank you so much. It's very interesting that you have resorted to these two strategies. You find common ground and then provide services based on these catalogs. And in order to build upon Diana's question, at any point in time, can you engage vulnerable populations, for example, the elderly or the disabled? How do you engage them? How do you provide these services to them, or how have you improved these services for these vulnerable populations? Well, as to personnel or person service, we coordinate with a local welfare network. I mean, the largest municipalities have their own welfare services. However, in those municipalities, when they don't have these welfare services available, both in terms of technical or personal or human services, we create this network, and therefore we provide these shared elements. I mean, we coordinate so as to provide these shared services. For example, having a social worker visiting a municipality one day a week, a different day another municipality. And one of the services that we have been rendering very successfully is what we call a SPEAR, that means breathing in Spanish. That is, we offer the municipalities the possibility of giving services to caregivers, because they care for people who are highly dependent. I mean, they cannot live on their own. So for 1 month or 1.5 months, we sort of pick that provide care to that person. We pick up that person, we take her somewhere else, and the carers can breathe for 1 month. I mean, they can sort of rest from a service that is very demanding for those when you have an elderly person that is fully dependent on you. And that is managed and coordinated by all the municipalities, in which this network of carers at the family level is more common. I mean, the elderly stay at home, and what we manage is that network element in which we replace for the carer. We schedule this at the municipal level. The municipality states, well, I have 10, 20, 14 families, and I need 60 persons to be replaced for, and that's what we do. Very interesting the way in which you manage public services for caregivers. That's something so important. We know that is very relevant, and moreover, this is a population that is not visible to many people. I mean, there are gender issues involved as well, and I see that these pool services are used to address these challenges that we face at a society level that have to do with gender equality, for example. I believe that what you're telling us is very interesting. And you have shared 2 or 3 very important experiences, the one of libraries, the ATM networks, and this problem, Breathe. But you can come on another service that can be very interesting and can be replicated in other contexts. Yes, there are many, but something that is really very highly demanded, moreover, because of this territorial imbalance, is what we call the rural path or rural routes and mobility at a local level. In the metropolitan and urban area, you have your own network and organization and structure, but in the rural sector, that's not present. Therefore, what we try to do is to improve the work for the mobility network. And this is a model, as I've said, that is focused on a pivot that is the provincial council that is self-sufficient, autonomous, and has its own resources. In the rest of the world, this administration does not exist. Therefore, how can you go about that? I mean, the most important thing about these municipal associations and the pool services to municipalities is ultimately has to do with the administrative agency that provides for these the management of services. And when municipalities are self-sufficient, I mean, and work autonomously, they might be willing to share services from the political viewpoint. There might be this political willingness. However, that becomes quite difficult because obviously the transfer of value that you need to do is quite important. Therefore, creating professional elements that can manage those services, because services are valued as to how professional they are or how professionally they are put into practice, that sometimes is quite cumbersome or complicated. And as a provincial council, we foster the self-organization on the part of municipalities, but we also count on a support policy that is both technically and economically for that to come true. Because if there is no support or guardianship or political and economic support, and I am aware of what things are like in Bolivia, but let's make an assumption that you may have small municipalities, for sure, certain higher administration, either state-owned or regional or provincial, shall provide its support so as to support them. I have muted, I'm sorry. Yes, for a couple of seconds. I believe that is very important, and everything needs to be organized. We need to somehow improve the elements or structure the professional networks, but obviously they need to be based upon a very significant technical and economic basis. Otherwise, an agreement is reached and everything works very well politically. For the first and second year, things work well, but then things fade out because we do not have that driving power or that binding power that is able to manage services. And let's be honest about this, let's be frank. Either there is a decisive support of the general administrations or the administrations that are above the municipal authority or the higher authorities, just to call them somehow. I do not mean higher or lower, but I mean, but it's obvious that an association of small municipalities, if they cannot get organized in this manner, is very complicated, because if they need to manage everything exclusively with their own resources, well, it's quite difficult to move forward, and it's even counterproductive for the same municipality because it's giving more than what it receives, and that's not sustainable. I mean, when a municipality gives more than what it takes, well, the equation is not the right one. Tony, I would like to emphasize something. I mean, the services that you render, as I've heard, are sustainable based on the resources that the council is endowed with. And the municipalities that are part of this association, do they have to contribute with certain installment or fees? Well, yeah, they have to pay a fee for certain services and not for others. In the case of the libraries, for example, in the case of the libraries, we manage the whole structure and yeah, all the structure and the assembly in a way. But the library itself, I mean, we appoint a person that is paid by the council, but the rest of the workers are paid by the municipality. And therefore, the municipality is the one that participates in the municipality at a cost. That is the cost of paying the salaries to those 2 or 3 persons that work in the library. It's not that the council will set up the library and pay for everything. There are certain services in which we accompany these municipality. We provide support and complement them in those areas in which they cannot render their own services. And moreover, when investments are concerned, I mean, we support investments, and we do so under certain, after doing certain studies of feasibility studies about the investment, and the investment is not well-grounded or based on a program that allows them to maintain the service, well, the network acts upon that.
There was a year when there were municipalities that were very close, and they were all requesting a covered swimming pool. And I wonder, well, is this necessary truly, investing in the building of covered swimming pools? Because actually we are talking about rural areas, but with maintenance and management costs that are very high, and we are talking about the covered swimming pool in a place, and then you are considering creating another 6 kilometers away. So, well, I always said, come on, ladies and gentlemen, come to an agreement. If there is a need in this territory, there is a need, a desire, a will to have a cover swimming pool, well, let's make an investment, but only one, centralized and shared. Shared, just one swimming pool, so that it is sustainable, because otherwise we will only make small, very small swimming pools, and actually that is not the case. Okay, I thought about something that we have a lot here, fields and stadiums that are very close from one another, where probably there hasn't been an assessment of sustainability regarding how many people will use the stadium, how many years, how many times a year, and the cost of the stadiums and fields are very high. So ultimately, they don't use that facilities because they don't have that the 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 people. So the model of sustainability regarding what you have explained at the very beginning, you come to an agreement, there is a need, there is a priority identified based on the municipalities, and which is not the only thing, but it's common based on that. You come to an agreement on the service that will be delivered. In the case, there is a catalog, and you assess the costs, because the investment that you're going to make will be sustainable, not in terms of return, but to be sustained in time. So for that, you have different models, as far as I understand. In certain cases, for example, the provincial council puts the staff, and the municipalities also put their own people, so that they have one just service for the association. That is very efficient, because you don't have to put all the staff everywhere. You know, I have this concern regarding risk management. We have talked a lot about environmental issues, but climate change, for example, and the adverse effects need to be monitored in terms of winds and heat, rainfall, frosting. That is very costly. That needs special services. And for example, a municipality of less than 110,000 inhabitants, it will be very costly for them to install programs. So the idea of having a pooled service where the information is for everybody, but they have a pool of professionals that for all the municipalities, that is something that probably will help this service and these early warnings reach the people, and the production, which is the livelihood of people, will not be affected by so many adverse events and losses. So it's very, very interesting what you are saying. And there is another element that is important that I want to put on the table, which is the uh, the central procurement method. What we do is to work on the following. When we are talking about the procurement of supplies, it happened, for example, where there was a transition of the public lighting system. We went from the bulbs to the LED bulbs. It was a need of all the municipalities. So what we did was to concentrate the procurement and the project management. We did it centrally, so that the costs were reduced dramatically, because we were in the position to buy 50 million bulbs, LED bulbs, and every municipality would buy 8,000 at the most. So the price of 8,000 was 50 million. So the unit price was much more, very, very different. So what we did was to join the demands, manage the procurement, and we did this in LED bulbs with the garbage containers, the famous garbage containers, individually, they're worth a lot.
Sí, sí.
And if you buy a lot, they are also very costly, but
Más caros.
one by one, they are more expensive. And with this, it's not that we are
Claro, claro,
given the
entiendo.
product for free. No, the municipality had to buy their LED bulbs and they have to buy their garbage containers. But if we procure in this way, in a more coordinated fashion, in a more structured fashion that allowed us to mm, provide a delivery of service that was much more beneficial, more efficient,
Claro.
efficient, more
Claro,
efficiency
es
there
muy
was.
importante el
Yes,
tema de
it
las
is
compras.
very important. The
Eso
procurement
que
part
has
is very
mencionado
important
es,
because what you have
es un tema muy
mentioned
importante, la
here is
eficiencia
something very
energética,
important.
una
Energy
competencia municipal en el
efficiency,
alumbrado público,
the public
todo esto debe
lighting
entender y
system.
el tema de
It's
los
very interesting.
residuos sólidos,
And
principalmente los
also
residuos
solid
sanitarios, en
waste.
una competencia municipal
Local
muy costosa,
solid
muy
waste
mal
is
gestionada
handled
precisamente por el tamaño de
locally,
los
very costly,
municipios.
poorly
Entonces, muy
managed due to the
interesante ver
size of
esos
the
recursos
municipality.
operativos
So these are
claramente se tienen
operational
que trabajar en términos de
situations that have
cómo
to
el
be handled in
procedimiento
terms of
para
how
lograrlo,
the
cómo debe
procedure
ser,
can be
porque ha sido un
achieved.
desafío la entrega
It is a
de
big
estas cosas.
challenge, the delivery of the supplies also, I suppose. Yes, and we the provincial council manages here everything, but in other areas, the organization of the city council means having the political will to do it, because from the point of view of structural resources, uh, the management of the whole procedure is very simple. It's not so costly. It is just one person who knows how to write the contract, who knows how to conduct the contract and allocation mechanism, and that's it. It's as simple as that. And putting everything in common. And when you have the contract, you have to make the same contract. If you put uh, uh,
Claro,
only a small number of bulbs or a large number of bulbs. So that need for association of services becomes a reality due to the interest of the very same city councils because they want to spend less. Yes, because Sanchez, when we talk about associations, and that happens also in the delivery of services, there is a kind of resistance to lose the local identity, so to speak, that is very endogamic because as I was telling you about the swimming pools, we were explaining the whole situation, but of course you had the mayor who said, okay, but I want mine. I want my swimming pool.
normal.
And you cannot go beyond that situation as if they were losing a local identity. If the swimming pool is in the town next door, well, I lose my identity somehow. So they didn't like it. So somehow they were losing the identity. And that vision of being more systemic, unfortunately, there are certain elements where the political issue interferes, hinders the process, and therefore it becomes a challenge. So w- when we talk about the associations of municipal services, um, of course, it is very important to consider sustainability, but also the element of the challenge of creating a real governance, managing this governance and going beyond your own municipality. And bear in mind that the local public politics and governance, unfortunately, in small um, city councils, municipalities should be a broader governance. You have to accept that. Otherwise, it's very difficult. And in fact, in the province of Barcelona, the small communities that have not overcome that challenge and have failed. But those who, at the end of the day, have overcome and have said, yes, the important thing is to receive the service that my citizen receives. They have worked and they work. The garbage management works. Okay, there truly what you are saying is a challenge, and that's how. And my first question had to do with governance and the political will and the political value, because I have had certain experiences regarding. Actually, there is an association. There is a metropolitan region here in Bolivia. We are talking about 7 municipalities of relatively uh, the biggest has like 325,000 inhabitants, but the smallest has less than 10,000. And they had come to an agreement regarding the management of a metropolitan landfill. So they they have some, they are not very scattered, they are close, that facilitates the service, but the political will could not join them all, and they did lots of studies. But what you are saying is correct. Sometimes the uh, uh, the political issue is a thing. The political, for example, the political point has a certain weight. Who is going to gain from the political point of view comes in the way. So we have to focus more in the service for the citizen, and also the negative effects on the environment that we all will pay for that. So it's very difficult sometimes to get this political will. The problem here was who was going to invest more, because they had more volume of garbage due to the larger number of inhabitants. There was a confusion there. There was a disagreement there. So actually, there was disagreement in the place where they were going to put the landfill. Yes, actually, uh, uh, I'm responsible for a local uh, provincial council, and I tell you that if we cannot come to an agreement and if we cannot reach consensus, then we should not complain, because there are elements such as for example, landfills where they should exist. So a higher administration, regional or state administration, will have to work out the problem, will have to do a national or regional planning and identify finally, because the landfill, it's a physical thing and should be placed in a certain place, and they will decide where to put it from above, from the state level, from the national level, that they put the landfill in a certain place. So when it is in a certain place, they will have to pay all the cost, and it would have been much better if they have reached this decision with consensus, and they would avoid the impact. That is a debate that somehow is difficult. When I've been in conversation in associations, I have always told them this on the table. I have told mayors, if you don't come to an agreement, well, the national government will come and will say, this is this, and that's the end.
And there will be no discussion about it. I mean, so if this is what we want, are we interested in this? Let's not fight about that, and let's save the meeting. Let's wait for the regional or the national government to define the water, the policy, the waste policy, or whatever, and then you will have to accept what they say. So the agreements are necessary, and building consensus is necessary. And I mean, it's out of need. I mean, if we are selfish, municipalities need each other. Municipalities are not so big. I mean, and they do need to work hand in hand with their neighbors, because at the end of the day, the beneficiary or the victim is the citizen. Yes, of course, of course. Your citizen and your voter. Well, I believe there are some messages in the chat here, some questions and things that are very interesting. I will read them for you. I will read them for you. There is a very interesting message. That is the political balance of political consensus and the territorial focus in order to balance the externality of certain investment and basic infrastructure. At times, decisions need to be made locally, sort of agreeing with what Octavi is saying. They need to be taken locally. You know that municipalities are the ones that best know the territory, but at some point in time, we need to have this national approach. Yes, I mean, we need to explain a little bit sort of the trick behind all this. Well, you know why the council was able to manage such an agreed service rendering model? Because from the political point of view, when we defined all these, the corporation, I mean, obviously there are political parties, minority political parties, and majority political parties and their officials. However, in our discussion, we always want the government of the council to reach the highest consensus possible. In this term, for example, the council is made up of by 9 different political groups or parties. 7 are part of the administration, 7 of them. And there are 14 different areas. Why do we have so many? In order to give them the chance of participating. And that tradition of building consensus has always been ingrained in the council. And adding a different element at the council, in the plenary sessions, we do not discuss general policies, we do not discuss regional policies, we do not discuss sector-based policies. If the government decides this or that, or I'm making it up, if the feminist movement says so and so, in the council, we don't discuss this type of topics. We only talk and discuss about municipal services, only that. And councilmen only speak about that. I'm talking about something that is public. In Catalonia, we've had these systems of discussion about independence, and in our council, political parties that obviously some of them were involved in the independence process and some others weren't, we all had reached the political agreement of not raising this topic in the council meetings. It was not a local matter, it was a national matter. Therefore, that discussion, of course, needs to exist, but will be addressed by political parties, not within the forum of the council, not in the city council, but in the corresponding regional or national or European space, but not at the council. And that agreement is sort of the trick behind or underlying all this that allow us to achieve success, gaining the political commitment that everything that will be discussed locally will pertain local matters. We will not mix rhetorics or topics or fields that I do understand that are part of the social debate or the national debate, but have nothing to do with a local matter. Otherwise, you create those conflicts or controversial areas that prevent you from progressing in those areas that have to do with everything that pertains to municipal associations. Tony, you've muted. The management and administration cannot be conflict-based. We have to do away with those conflicts. That's a very interesting point, and I will connect this to a question raised by Edward Pacheco that is asking how you've implemented the SDG agenda. Is this something that helps you improve governance, helps you plan in your municipalities? Well, the SDGs have been addressed based on localization. I mean, when we manage the budget or design the budget or manage activities, all the activities, even the budget itself, even the items of the budget themselves are organized and are supported by the localization of the corresponding SDG. And from that viewpoint, that SDG is the base upon which the consensus is reached and everything is developed. Then we agree upon the fact that we need to work on a certain SDG. We all agree on that. Not everyone, but well, most of the people are. And from that point on, we develop the agenda of the actions to be implemented. And that's also used to raise priorities or to set priorities, because from the climate viewpoint, that's the most complex one, yes. There be many different options and different visions and strategies. Yes, there are some that would favor the accomplishment of the goal, the climate goal, and it will be more clear that you will accomplish this through a certain program, structure, or action rather than other. Or that if it is clear that one is more of a priority than the other one, and then localizing SDGs helps us set priorities and taking actions. At the time of deciding, for example, when we break down the needs and we reach the agreements at the different municipality tables, they expose their needs and we identify whether that falls within the scope of an SDG, and moreover, up to what extent that proposal would sort of focus on the accomplishment of a certain SDG. I mean, we do not have to claim that it meets the SDG, but what element would, or what improvement it would cause in the accomplishment of the SDG. I mean, otherwise we always focus on headlines because it's a very broad area. Everything can fight against poverty, but some things can be better to fight against poverty than others, yes. And that is something to take into account at the time of planning and at the time of awarding resources as well. Yes, sure. Well, Tony, it's been so wonderful to talk to you. I hope that this dialogue has been useful to all those that are part of these, have been attendees to this webinar. We need to close, and I would allow myself the possibility of summarizing this a little bit. But the association and pool of services is very useful when it is focused on the citizen. And in focusing on the citizens, you need to consider the priorities that municipalities have raised. There should be a catalog of services very clearly defined and have clear in mind how costs would be shared and divided, and at the same time the discussions to reach consensus should be focused on the citizen-based services that are rendered locally, and that's the most important message that I can pinpoint. When we are talking about municipal services, the most important thing is to focus on the citizen and how to reach the citizens, and then decisions and political willingness is based on this. And that's why municipal associations is positive. We have talked about governance, sustainability around it, that there are certain services that need to be supported through subsidies. We need to focus our attention that their services shall be based upon feasibility study or analysis, so as not to create infrastructure that has no sustainability, and some other points that we need to concentrate on common ground or common interest. That has been very important throughout our discussion. I would like to thank you, Tony, for sharing your knowledge, your experience, the experience of the Provincial Barcelona Council. I have to tell you that this is quite similar to the way things are done here, both in Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, and in other places of the world. Things should be like that. Therefore, your experience has been very valuable. I would like to share you for your participation, and I think that we've made a very effective use of time. A little ad. As Barcelona Provincial Council, we have our cooperation policy, and within this cooperation policy for development, Latin America is a clear priority to us and a strategic area for cooperation. I would like to make myself available to you, to make available to your municipalities, and anything that you may need. I mean, the Barcelona Council is open to sharing and to working on the fields that have to do with cooperation for development. And I would like to make ourselves available to the Latin American communities, both in Bolivia, and Ecuador, or Peru, or Colombia. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Tony. And of course, we rely on that. Many of us will count on your support, and we can make use of that technical support and technical assistance that is so valuable. We all know that financial resources are not as important as knowledge-based resources in this globalized world where we face global challenges, but local actions. And it's very important to share that knowledge so as to shorten the way. I would like to thank all the participants and all the attendees, and I would like to thank you for the UNDP for having organized this meeting. I would like to thank Diana, that is not on the screen, but she's the alma mater that has allowed us to organize this event. I would like to thank her for the invitation. And well, I hope that we can move forward and continue along this way. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.